In with the extraordinary and out with the ordinary. Hello everybody, how's it going? Lord Josh here once again, and today I would like to talk to you about weather manipulation. It always makes me laugh when people come to me and they say, Lord Josh, you cannot control the weather. It's impossible. It's too unrealistic. How could you deal with all of that power? It just isn't real. I always say to people, well, take a look at your own government and the experiments they've been conducting now for several decades. You see, most people like to look at the world through rose-colored spectacles and think that everything is fine. Everything is perfect. Well, I am not going to disempower you and say that you should be afraid of these experiments. I actually think it's just as valid as the kind of work that I'm doing. And it depends on who you ask. A lot of people are generally opposed to weather magic. They don't agree with a solo practitioner or a team of people playing God with the environment. And I can totally understand that perspective. However, I think it is important that we must learn we are one with nature and one with the environment. And if we understand that, it's not really like you're hacking reality. You're more or less just becoming one with it. But I think you would be rather hard-pressed to find someone who could deny the vast differences between weather magic and weather manipulation. You see, weather magic to me is a very personable, beautiful experience in which you are able to temporarily become a god and you truly feel the adrenaline rush of power coursing through your veins. And it is dramatic and very satisfying to feel that power. I never get the vibe that I shouldn't be doing this, or this is ethically or morally wrong. It just feels right, and it feels divine. I'm not sure I could say the same thing for weather manipulation, which to me would have no feeling. And the main reason for that, it's the absence of spirituality. It's having no individuality to express your own unique path, to wander it yourself. And I suppose you could say it is the argument between science and spiritualism, because one is focused on the gain of the self and the empowerment of one's own identity, and the other one is factual and quite cold. But is that necessarily a bad thing? No, I don't think so, because I regard the universe in and of itself to be quite a cold place. To me, nothing is more neutral than the weather. It all depends on the use and the intent behind it. China has invested $30 million into a weather manipulation program, and I believe it's been well documented and well publicized that they have been using this program to change the weather for sporting events, most especially the Olympics. Their methods involve shooting salt and mineral-filled bullets into the sky to encourage it to rain. And if you think it's just China, then think again. There's a reported 52 countries, including the United States, jumping on board with their own weather manipulation programs. And I think, if I'm honest, I really believe they've got a lot more sinister intentions than just making it a nice sunny day for the Olympics. The technology that is being used is quite interesting as well. It reminds me a lot of Wilhelm Reich's orgone energy, otherwise known as orgonite. I actually use it myself for my own personal ceremonies, and I can say that it does indeed work. And it's quite funny actually seeing the similarities between the two now, that the authorities are beginning to use a lot of the materials that we occultists have been using for a very long time, because there's truth to them, they're authentic, and they do work. Now, going back to the Chinese program, the Beijing Weather Modification Office actually employs 37,000 people nationwide, and they are able to seed clouds by firing projectiles loaded with silver iodide. Now, of course, the purpose of this most of the time is to prevent a storm or rainfall or heavy clouds from rolling in. But in 1997, on New Year's Day, this actual weather modification office was responsible for creating snow. And the office also created snowfall in November of 2009, a heavy snowstorm entirely man-made. Now, this is no longer science fiction. This is not a fantasy anymore. It's already happening. But it doesn't worry me too much. I have to say that if they want to mess around with the weather for sporting events, that's perfectly fine in my opinion. I have no problems with that. However, it gets to the point where there are psychological elements involved. The weather has a profound effect on people's moods and their mental stability. So much so that there is a condition called seasonal affective disorder, otherwise known as SAD, S-A-D. And it's a condition that occurs during the winter months. It's more commonly known as the winter blues. And it can cause chronic depression, people can get suicidal over it, and it really makes you feel low in your energy and in your mood. Now, if the government has the potential to control the weather, they could, in theory, start implementing these programs in where they want to lower everybody's frequency. If you have a population of depressed people, dependent people who rely on the state in order to survive, that's exactly where they want you to be. Now, it does sound quite dramatic and conspiratorial, but I think it's logical. If you're feeling under the weather and you're subjected to dark days, gloomy conditions, that's going to have an internal effect inside of you. As above, so below. As within, so without. You're going to always have that partnership between man and nature, and they influence each other. But if there's somebody controlling that, or a team of people controlling it, and conspiring in such a way where they want you to feel negative, they can absolutely achieve that. Why this is so important is because unlike the emotion anger is very motivating. It can encourage you to really take a stand and make a change. Whereas depression and sadness, they're the stagnation of energy. So if you get a population of chronically depressed people, it's nothing more than a civilization of clones and conformists. And if this technology gets into the wrong hands, it could be used to demoralize the entire population and put people into a very submissive type of victim mindset. Think about it like this. Everybody's worrying about the chemtrails. People are worrying about the fluoridated water. People are worrying about the pills that doctors are pushing. In my opinion, those things, yes, they are contributing to the chaos, but we are dealing with an invisible enemy at the moment. People will simply blame it on the weather and nothing else. And as an expert, as someone who has been practicing weather magic now for around 10 years, I'm able to see and understand when I'm looking at a storm, I can instantly tell if it's naturally occurring or if it's man-made. And I'm going to give you some tips and some advice here on how to spot that for yourself. The biggest giveaway when you begin to smell a storm, if it smells natural, then it's probably not man-made. If you can smell a metallic, acidic, almost a kind of chemical-based smell, that's usually indicative of the shavings, the magnetic shavings that they load into these bullets. And if you go outside and you taste the rain and it tastes very acidic, that's a warning sign. That's definitely not a naturally occurring storm. I refer to these artificial storms as synthetic storms, and I would estimate that around 60 to 70% of the storms that I get in my local area, most of them are man-made and they are artificial. And that poses quite a big problem for someone like me who lives in an agricultural environment, and I live a very natural, healthy lifestyle. I try to grow most of my produce outdoors. I don't like the idea of having poison on my crops. In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons why I started studying and practicing weather magic, to try and take some control back. And most of the time it does work. If you use things like cloud-busting cannons that are orgonite in origin, they really do help to dissipate a lot of the chemical clouds. And having one's crops poisoned, one's organic crops that you've grown yourself, that's distressing enough, to say the least. But what really upsets me and puts me in a state of anxiety is weather warfare. That takes it to a whole new level. When you're dealing with the military, and they start to use the natural environment to their advantage, which they've always done this. This is nothing new. but it's not as out there in the open as weather modification is. Weather modification, they don't mind telling you about it, but these top secret operations involving tornadoes, tsunamis, and earthquakes designed primarily for destruction, that's something people need to be aware of. But you can fight back. You don't have to be a sitting duck. There are ways that you can prepare yourself for an Armageddon type situation. You don't have to just sit there and take it. And if you think it's just another conspiracy theory with no evidence behind it, think again. Because there's a treaty that was created, open for signature on 18th of May 1977 in Geneva, and entered into force on the 5th of October 1978. This treaty supposedly bans all of those who want to use weather for military purposes. And I would say that this treaty has been abused several times over since then, because you've got the Harp Program, which is based in Alaska. HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, and it was created and founded in 1990 and has actually now closed down. I believe it closed down in 2015. Gee, I wonder why. I think people were catching on, and it got to the point where the so-called theories, the conspiracy theories, became so popular that the actual people working there began to address them. That's when you know that these theories hold some weight to them. And of course, whilst we're on the subject of weather warfare, how could we possibly forget Master Zhuge Liang, who is one of my spirit masters? If you read the book Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the historical novel, you will see in that book it mentions Kong Ming Zhuge Liang procuring a southeastern gale for the Battle of Chibi, otherwise known as the Red Cliffs. Now that was used for military purposes. But fear not, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are ways to get around this and to face this head on, and one of those is to learn the difference between the synthetic storms and their natural counterparts, and the other is to try to study and begin practicing weather magic, because you need to be able to use the weather to your own advantage as a means of self-defense for protecting you, your family, and your own land. That's very important. So thank you for watching, everybody. Take care. I'll be back soon.